So sometime later in the afternoon, the sun is going to be a distraction to all of us, because there's something called a non-happening called an eclipse is going to non-happen. I think I'm going to take the gift of having this this non-happening in our awareness, or those of us who read newspapers or watch TV or have heard that there's something that's called an eclipse going to happen today between somewhere around 6 o'clock. And I want to take the gift of that non-happening to explain something to you scientifically, which you might not have realized, is that there really is no such thing as an eclipse. Nothing is really happening. What's happening is we happen to be standing in a particular position, and two things are crossing, and from this position it appears in a certain way. To make that a big deal would be like making a big deal that if she were to stand up, she would be obscuring my view of him in the back, and we would all gather around to wait to watch that phenomenon of that obscuring to happen. Because an eclipse is a verb. It's a moving of things. There is nothing that happens to the moon and nothing that happens to the sun. The sun is not part of the eclipse, and the moon is not part of the eclipse. The only thing that makes it attractive to us is the third element that's part of the eclipse, which to us is the most important element, and that is us. The eclipse is all about us. It's an us observation, and to make it into anything else is to make even more about us than this non-event is not about us. So this non-event does affect the light that we see in a way that we don't ordinarily see it. And that can be interesting, to see a different type of light at night. I was in Alaska some years ago, and it gets dark very late, very late, very late. You find yourself eating dinner at midnight, and because it's light, it is a phenomenon. It is interesting. It's also interesting when you're in an airplane to be looking down at the sunset rather than up at the sunset. It's interesting to look down at the clouds. There's a different perspective. It is interesting. It is curious, but nothing is happening. Nothing is happening except your perspective is in a particular place. Your point of view is in a particular place. It's all about our point of view. It's not a phenomenon of the sun, and it's not a phenomenon of the moon. They're doing what they're doing. So somewhere around 6 o'clock, we'll make sure that we observe this and we look at it. And if it's something that's curious, I'll make sure that you see it. We've been told, we read in the newspapers, we hear people talk about it. It's become an event so that we become interested in that event. And that really is so much the nature of our lives, and I want to talk about that a little because it concerns me. There was a man, he's still alive, his name is Harry Markopolos. I'm sure none of you are familiar with his name, but he was a financial investigator. I don't think he is anymore, on the East Coast. And he was the first person to have an inkling that there was some kind of a swindle going on with Bernie Madoff and his financial empire. And that there was this pyramid scheme happening where people were putting in millions and millions of dollars, in organizations and hospitals and retirement funds were putting in millions and millions of dollars into this investment fund, and that actually was a pyramid scheme in which people would eventually be losing their money. And this guy, Harry Markopolos, is an investigator, and he couldn't really get anyone to listen to him. And for 10 years he pursued this investigation, sometimes for agencies, and a lot of the time on his own. But he really had very little success in getting attention until this financial empire of Bernie Madoff started to disintegrate, and people started to actually tangibly lose money. And it must have been a very frustrating experience for Harry Markopolos, and I can particularly identify with that. But he really only became active and what's called a whistleblower when he recognized that some people that he really cared about, and some children's hospitals that really that he had a feeling for their importance, were part of this swindle. And I can very much relate to this because I am concerned not about the global deception of what success is and what fulfillment is and what it means to be happy and how one goes about that, but that some of my newfound friends and some of my older found friends have fallen victim to this pyramid scheme. The pyramid scheme not of Bernie Madoff, but the pyramid scheme of being convinced that the actions they're taking to get recognition, to get approval, to become wealthy, to develop reputations, to feel insulated and supported by reputation, that some of my newfound friends have been convinced and have become victims. They're not in the process of becoming victims, but they have become victims of this pyramid scheme. That there is some deep and meaningful reward to reputation, that there is some deep and meaningful reward to regard, to accomplishment, that people say, oh, you're a wonderful person. And if enough people say that you're a wonderful person, you may actually be a wonderful person. And I'm concerned about that, and I feel in a way like Harry Markopolos, that somebody has to make a statement, and someone has to stand for that, no, this is not the case.